Hello, and welcome to Esperanto 101, Week 4. This week, we are going to get really into the heart of the conversation vocabulary now that you've got the basics of the grammar down. So, we're going to start with just greetings and introductions, and the very first word you will have in most Esperanto conversations is saluton. This is made up of salut, which saluti would be the verb to greet. So saluto is a greeting. You will notice the N on the end of it means that it is in the accusative case. That means it's a direct object. That might be confusing. That's because, though, you're not actually saying the whole sentence. Like, if you say thanks in English, you don't say I give you thanks, you just say thanks, which is why the word thanks, which is dankon, is also in the accusative. It ends with that same N. You say saluton because you are saying I give you greeting. I am giving you a greeting. Saluton. But all you'll ever actually need to say is the one word because the rest is just always going to be assumed. If you already know the person, then odds are the next question is going to be Kiel vi fartas? How? Remember, it starts with a K as a correlative, so it's a question. And so kiel and the correlatives that end with L were about in what manner. So how do you, and then fartas is a present tense verb, and if you are half as immature as I am, you're probably giggling at that word, but it doesn't mean what it sounds like in English. The way I had to think of it is, how do you fare? Basically, it means, how are you doing? But it's not, how do you do, because you're not asking someone how to do something. You're asking them, how do you fare? And the answer is, mi fartas. Usually the answer is mi fartas bone, which is the adverb form of the word good, bono. It is an adverb because it's not describing you. It's not saying that I am a good person. That doesn't tell you how I'm doing. That tells you how pompous I am. You say, I fare well. And you're describing how you are doing. So because of that, it has to be an adverb, bone. It is spelled just like the English word bone, B-O-N-E. It looks a lot weirder than it sounds, especially if you're new at this, it's gonna look weird at first. But it gets to be normal. Mi fartas bone is the answer to Kiel vi fartas. If you have not yet spoken to this person before, if this is a first-time conversation, particularly out loud, you might get Kio estas via nomo. Kio, what? Estas is via, your, nomo, name. So we've already dealt with Kio last week. It's a question, and it's asking what thing, just what, is present tense, your, because vi is you, and if you make it an adjective, then it's your. It's a possessive. And nomo means name. It is a noun. You might notice here that none of these words ends with the letter N. there is not any accusative word in here. And that is because estas, the verb esti, to be, does not grant the accusative case to anything. Basically, the way I think of it is, estas works like an equal sign. What equals your name? And similarly, your name could equal what? It's like, Sam I am Sam. It means the same thing. So it doesn't make sense to say that one of these just really has to be receiving the action of to be, while the other one is doing the being, because it's the same thing. So, kio estas via nomo? And I would say, mia nomo estas Charo. I would probably not say that to actual people. I would give my real name. But for now, mia nomo estas Charo. My name is Charo, or whatever your name is, obviously. A very common question in Esperantujo, Esperanto land, is de kie vi estas? From where are you? Where are you from? De is from or of. And this is a very common question because Esperanto really is an international language. And you're just as likely to talk to someone from Brazil as you are from America, or from China, or from Russia, or from Sweden. And I'm not just making up countries. I actually know Esperantists in all of these countries, and I've only known the language for a few years. It's really an international language, and you can learn a whole lot about other cultures just by having Esperanto conversations with people on Facebook, for example, and asking, de kie vi estas? And asking them to tell you more about their country. And if someone asks you, then you would say, mi estas de, and then wherever you're from. So, for example, mi estas de Texaso. I am from Texas. It might be a very different question for some people to ask, kie vi loĝas? Where do you live? Now, I'm going to clarify that this is really a better translation would be, where do you lodge? It's asking, where do you live, like, where's your house, sort of thing. The word for to live is vivi, like to be alive. This is not asking, where are you alive? It's asking, where do you live? Where do you hang your hat? To use an oddly American South expression. Sorry about that. So, kie vi loĝas? And right now, my answer happens to be the same. Mi loĝas ĉe Teksaso. I made a point to to list both of those questions out for you, both de kie vi estas and kie vi loĝas, because for a lot of people it's not the same question, and for a lot of people this question is a lot easier. Many Esperantists haven't necessarily lived in just the one place all their lives. It's the kind of people who would really feel like they might need an international language. People who feel like maybe they could benefit from it. Or people who are just really interested in other languages are the kinds of people who often will learn Esperanto. And so you wind up having people who, in a lot of cases, have just lived all over the place. And if you're like me, it's really hard to answer the question, where are you from, sometimes, or where's home, because sometimes we just don't know. So it's a lot easier to say, mi loĝas ĉe Teksaso, and that will most of the time answer the question that's actually meant to. Because while it's interesting to know that you're talking to a person who was born in Japan but has lived in Brazil for most of their adult life, it's probably going to tell you more to know where they're staying now, where they've spent most of their time. But you'll get either question. I figured I'd list both of them. Another question that will happen a lot is this. Kiam vi eklernis Esperanton? Now, Esperanton, you probably have figured out by now. It is in the accusative case because it is what you started, past tense, to learn. Lerni is the verb for to learn. Along the sidebar of the Esperanto subreddit, or Esperanto 101 subreddit, I know, there is a link to Lernu, which is an Esperanto site, and its name entertains me because it just means learn as a command. And so many Esperantists will want to know, when did you start to learn Esperanto? Because it's kind of an unusual thing. They will probably also ask you many other questions. Why did you choose to learn Esperanto? How did you choose to learn Esperanto? And that's where you'll be really glad you have those correlatives, the tabelvortoj. Because then, once you know how to recognize kiam, when did you begin to learn? And they might ask you in different ways, but it'll all say kiam, vi, and lerni in there somewhere. And all of it you'll be able to figure out with what we've already learned. And the answer, if someone asks you that, would be mi eklernis, I began to learn, antau. Antau means before. But the way we use it here, you would say mi eklernis antau a certain number of semainoi, weeks, monatoi, months, or jaroi, years. And it's very much like the English I started to learn 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, maybe 4 weeks ago. But in that case, antau would be like ago, except it's just a different way of structuring it because of the particular structure of Esperanto. So, mi eklernis antau du jaroj kaj duono. So, I began to learn about 2.5 years ago, which shows you something about how easy this language is to learn, because I studied other languages for 3-4 years at a time, and I still can't speak them half as well as I can speak Esperanto. So, mi eklernis antau, however many, unu, du, tri, kvar, kvin, and so on. Semainoi, monatoi, or jaroj. I'm going to pause here and mention something about the number system, because that's going to be kind of important with that last question. I have it listed out in very brief in the Esperanto in 3 pages document. But for those who are more auditory learners, I'll go ahead and explain it here as well. Unu is 1. Du is 2. Tri is 3. Tri. Kvar, Kvar, is 4. Kvin, Kvin, is 5. Ses, Ses, is 6. Sep, Sep, is 7. Ok, OK, is 8. Now, no, a, wo, the U with a hat, is 9. And dek is 10. You will need to know those numbers, and then cent, C-E-N-T, is 100, and mil, M-I-L, is 1,000. And if you can remember those 12 words, then you can say a whole lot of numbers in Esperanto, because it's all got a very easy to understand system. Dek unu, which is to say 10-1, is 11. Dek du, which is to say 10-2, is 12. And so on, all the way up to 19. Dek now. You say 10, and then the number, and then however many teen it is, like dek unu, 11. Dek du, 12. Dek 3, 13. You just say 10 and then that number, and basically what you're doing is you're laying out the tens place and then the ones place. So then 20 is dudek. So 20 is dudek, which is to say you're saying there's a 2, but it's in the tens place. And you don't have to say what's in the ones place if there's just a 0 in the ones place. If there's a 1 in the ones place, then you would say du dek unu. So 2 tens and a 1. If it's 101, you would say cent unu. So there's something in the hundreds place, and then there's a 1 in the ones place. If you wanted to say 121, it would be cent du dek unu. So there's a 100, and then there's a 2 in the tens place, and then there's a 1. If the number in the 100s place isn't a 1, then you'll have to specify du cent du dek unu. A 2 in the 100s place, a 2 in the tens place, and then a 1. So 221. And just like that, with those 12 words, you could count all the way up to just shy of 1,000,000, which, by the way, I can't remember off the top of my head, because when do I talk about millions of things? Anyway, so that will be most of the introductory conversation in Esperanto. They will want to first say saluton, hello, or bonvenon, which is welcome. It's almost just literally welcome. Remember, bono is good, so bone is well. Veni, you haven't learned yet, I don't suppose, which is to come. And then you just squish those together and make it a noun in the accusative. So bon ven on, which is well come. It's in the accusative because, again, it's just the last part of a sentence, and the rest of the sentence is one that we just assume is there. just like with thanks, dankon. And the customary answer to dankon, by the way, just like in English we would say you're welcome, or in Spanish you would say de nada, of nothing, think nothing of it. In Esperanto, the customary response to dankon, thanks, is ne dankinde. Ne dankinde. It's all one word. It's written somewhere at the very top of the 3rd page of Esperanto in 3 pages, if you need to see it written out. And literally, it's ne, no, dank, which danki is to thank, ind, you will remember from week 2 affixes, ind is like worthy, and makes it an adverb. So, literally translated, it would be something like unthankworthily. More reasonably translated, it means no thanks necessary. Other words you might need to know in these basic conversations are yes and ne. Sorry, for you to read, not me. Yes and ne. Yes is the word yes. You will notice it starts with a J because the letter Y does not exist in Esperanto, and the letter J makes that sound in Esperanto. Yes. And ne, we already talked about when it's being used with verbs to negate the verb or to negate a command, like estutie would be there, and ne estutie would be don't be there. But ne is also just the word no or not. It is just the general negative thing. So, if someone asks you, "Ĉu vi bon fartas?" which is a different way of saying "Kiel vi fartas," it's "ĉu," which remember is just like a verbal question mark that you add at the beginning of the sentence. Vi is you, bon is good, and fartas is fair. So, ĉu vi bon fartas is do you fare well? And then you could just answer yes or ne, or yes mi fartas bone, or ne mi fartas mal bone, I fare poorly, which remember mal is like anti-well is poorly. And when the conversation is over, you will finish it most of the time with gis, which is short for gis revido or gis poste or other similar things. Revido is re, again, vid, which vidi is to see, and o makes it a noun. So revido is next sight. So gis means until. So gis revido is until we see each other again, until next sight. Or gis poste, until later. Oftentimes, Esperantists won't bother with the revido or poste part of the sentence, and they'll just say gis or gis la, which is short for gis la revido, until the next time we see each other. And odds are, the vast majority of your first all-Esperanto conversation will consist of just this. Saluton. Saluton. Kiel vi fartas? Mi fartas bone. Kiel vi fartas? Ankaŭ mi fartas bone. Ankaŭ means too or also, but you need to have ankaŭ placed immediately before the thing that is also. You're saying, you don't say, I'm doing well also, because that doesn't work as well. Then we can't tell what the also is applied to. Like, oh, I'm doing well too. Or, I also am doing well. So you say, ankaŭ mi fartas bone. And then they might ask, kio estas via nomo? And you would say, mia nomo estas such and such. Kio estas via nomo? And they would respond, mia nomo estas such and such. And then they might ask, de kie vi estas? Where are you from? And you can say, mi estas de this place. And then you might further say, even without them asking kie vi loĝas, you could say, kai mi loĝas ĉe at this place. That is something I don't believe I mentioned earlier. Ĉe means at, but I wouldn't say I live in Texas. I would say I live at Texas, because Texas isn't like a jar that I would be inside of. It's a place that I am at. You could say in Texas, but I would say ĉe because it makes more sense to me. And then, very often, you will have new Esperantists or Esperantists whom you've just met ask you, kiam vi eklernis Esperanton? When did you begin to learn Esperanto? So that way they can kind of get a feel for how many complicated words they should use for you. They're not going to start talking to you in depth about taxonomy and things of that nature, or going deep into sciences and computers and high literature if you tell them, mi eklernis antaŭ unu monato. If you say, I just started learning a month ago, then probably the response will be, if you're having a text conversation, ho, which is just oh, but ho, vi parolas bone, you speak well, or something to that effect. But most of those things, the little things past there, you will be able to figure out by looking up, if you're anything like me at first, probably almost every other word on Lernu. You will have to do a lot of looking words up in online dictionaries. It doesn't matter how effective I am as a teacher, that's just something everyone goes through, is looking up a ton of words in dictionaries for the first little while they're learning. And sometimes people who've been learning the language for years will still have to go look up a word. I know someone I was talking to some Esperantists who've known the language for decades now, and they had to look up the word for poop deck, because how often do we talk about ships? But we were talking about ships, so we had to go look it up. Paupo, if you care. And then, once you've finished having that conversation, as we are now finished with this lesson, you can say, Ĝis revido. So, ĝis revido, kaj dankon por lerni kun mi. Until next time, and thank you for learning with me.